Gratitude in Low Voices is an uplifting memoir about one man's journey from war-torn Eritrea to asylum in the United States. Despite steep odds, DeWitt Habte's resilience, positive attitude, and work ethic helped him find purpose in an unfamiliar land. The story of DeWitt.
Hi, how are you? Welcome to this another milestone of Dawit's life. Today, we are going to join Dawit, his wife Mona Lisa Towalde, his family members and friends for the book introduction and signing. Dawit's book, Gratitude in Low Voices, tells a true story that reminded me the arduous journey I went through, I myself. I joined Dawit on the travels he went all the way from home country, the United States of America. Also, the way he composed to express the situation of the Horn of Africa and its implications due to political decisions made by some countries that have still an impact in the current situation in the area. Dawit, you expressed it very well, and thank you for doing that. The other important point in the book, in my view, that I got it is also Dawit's telling gives hope for those people who are about to lose a hope with the current situation in their countries all over the world. When someone focuses and always kept hope in his heart, then there is always a hope at the end of the tunnel. And that we find it as well in Dawit's book. Again, I would like to congratulate Dawit, and I thank you all for coming and joining this important event for Dawit, our brother, and his wife as well.
I'm not so good with notes. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Dawit for an excellent book. Unfortunately, it's not going to be my story because I didn't quite leave the way he did from Eritrea. I'm one of the airline brats that got transferred from one airport to the other and never saw the underworld. But quite a riveting story about a young man and the enormous courage it takes at that age to do the things that he did, to come here, and once here, to fulfill the dreams and aspirations that he carried with him throughout his life. It's quite an amazing story. I don't want to give it away, but I'd like to say a few things about Dawit. He's an accomplished software engineer right here at Bloomberg. That's his daytime job. The other Dawit is a prolific writer whose many analytical articles, which supersede the seminal book, have contributed to a better understanding of Eritrea and its people, their history, and their cultures. No doubt many have crossed his path since he arrived in the United States, and we will be hearing from some of them today. His book, Gratitude in Low Voices, is an important milestone, and no one expects to write a memoir at such a young age unless there's something significant to tell that needs to be told. And there is, beyond Dawit's personal journey, as need to tell Eritrea's history, albeit in small chapters through personal stories like that of Dawit's here. We're given an opportunity to go behind the headlines to the homes and revisit history through Dawit's journey. And I hope as more of you read his book, more and more Eritreans will be compelled to write and tell their stories in their own ways, and to fulfill what every Eritrean wants is a complete story to be told of this country and its courageous, equally courageous journey, post-independence and pre-independence. I thank you. I'd like to introduce a few speakers that will be talking about Dawit today. Joe Breda is the Executive Vice President for Product Research and Development at Bloomberg BNA. We'll start with you, Mr. Breda.
I took a look at the agenda after I agreed to participate and speak today. And I'll just say that I'm really humbled to be included in the company of such esteemed speakers, and I'll try and keep my comments appropriately brief. So DeWitt and I met in 2013 when I left Bloomberg headquarters in 2013 to take a position here at Bloomberg BNA in Arlington. And I was asked to lead a team of about 200 people, and I had a big problem. My problem was I really didn't know any of them. And so my first order of business was really to find a core group of confidants to help me navigate the organization. And one of my first allies in the company here was DeWitt. This was a man that was open-minded but decisive. He was honest, trustworthy, technically savvy, and a man who could get things done. And we worked extremely well together and continue to work extremely well together. And we're more than colleagues, we've become friends. I felt a little uneasy one day when he asked me as a friend to take a look at this and say, hey, I have this manuscript I've been working on. I'd like you to read it and tell me what you think. This is a little bit of a dilemma because I'm thinking to myself, and I did not understand his background. Even though we were friends, I had not taken the time to understand his background and his incredible story. Just knowing him, working with him for the past few years was enough to make my assessment of what a great person he was, but I didn't know the depth of his story. And I'm thinking to myself, what if it's like a really bad sitcom or some piece of Pulp Fiction? And we had such an honest relationship that I felt if it was really bad, that I'd have the duty to tell him that, right? And then that might affect our relationship. So what do? I do what anybody does in that situation. I procrastinated. So I sat this in a drawer of my nightstand for weeks and didn't look at it. And one day, guilt got the better of me, right? He entrusted me to look at this, obviously very important to him. He put his heart into it. For better or worse, the least I could do is sit down and read it. And I probably read it in a single night because it was really engrossing. It's a compelling human story. I learned a great deal about history and geopolitics that I was completely ignorant of. And I also gained a much deeper appreciation for DeWitt. So I committed to help him see the book published in whatever small way I could contribute. And I'll give you a little story about maybe the small way I tried to help. It's a story. So I do want to note, and I'm gonna read this literally because it's Deepak Chopra and I don't want to get it wrong, but he's written that coincidences are not accidents, but signals from the universe that guide us. In the month following reading the manuscript, I found myself in a situation that really confirms this hypothesis. I was presenting to Mike Bloomberg and his management committee in New York City. And during the course of this presentation, which and a little bit of nerves, as you might imagine, I forgot a key detail, a key fact that was part of my presentation. It was very uncomfortable for me. But I think Mike, just instinctively to put the room at ease, just started talking and started commenting about how he had been blessed with such an amazing memory. And I will tell you from everything I've seen, it is really amazing. He had great memory. There's this one thing that's tickling the back of my mind that I can't remember. He said, I had this back in early 2000s. I had this software developer that worked for me. And he had escaped to come ultimately to go to Hopkins and work for me. And he presented this business plan, and he wanted me to send him back to Eritrea to help his people build an IT infrastructure. And Mike Bloomberg, being the type of person he is, probably one of the greatest philanthropists the world has ever known, said, sure, I'm going to send you. And he says, I cannot, for the life of me, remember that guy's name. So here's where I get to be smart. I said, like, I know who that is. He looks at me like, you're really out of your mind now. And I said, his name's Dawit Habti. He moved to DC several years ago to work for Bureau of National Affairs. You acquired that company in 2011, and he's still there, so now he actually works for you again. And he has a really interesting story that you should read about. And Mike said, send him my way. And ultimately ended up being a tremendous supporter of Dawit and his book and making gratitude in low voices a reality. So that's my story. I want to close with some personal observations. To me, this book is a reminder that when we close our borders, we close our eyes to the plight of billions of fellow human beings we share this planet with. We also close our minds. We deprive them of our compassion. But we are deprived of their perspectives and their contributions. We are deprived of the richness of things like this book bring to our lives. Ultimately, we deprive ourselves. In my case, whether by coincidence or guiding signal of the universe, I am so blessed to have a deep friendship with Dawit, and a much better person for having learned his story. We seem so different, born thousands of miles apart in vastly different circumstances. Yet when I think deeper, I think about my own father, who migrated with his family from Italy, a country geographically not that far away, and intertwined with the history of Eritrea. And he and his family left under circumstances of immense poverty to look for a better life. So perhaps when we reflect, we're really not all that different after all. So thank you for coming today, and Dawit, thank you for asking me to be a part of this.
Thank you, Joe. We have lots of stories about Dawit. I'm sure everybody's itching to tell theirs. But we have another speaker for this afternoon, Mr. Charles Snyder. He's the Maryland State Delegate representing District 44B, 44-8. That's what happens when you get old and can't see without your glasses. Member of the House Judiciary Committee and the legislature. I'm much older than Dawit, so I have a right to go blind. Beat him by at least 20 years. Welcome.
Wow. Good morning, everyone. Or good afternoon, I should say. My name is Charles Sidnor. We talked about stories. I met Dawit over 20 plus years ago as a student at Johns Hopkins University. How you doing, Rose? and I tell you, when I think about Dawit, I think about someone who was always trying to share part of him to make you better. As a student, he would share a number of these stories that, it's funny, looking back in retrospect, I never quite knew the depth of the stories. So when he told me a number of years ago that he was putting a manuscript together, so I was a bad friend. In between law school and everything, I had the manuscript, but the guilt didn't ride me to read it. I said I was going to read, but just never got to it. So when he came and he said that he had this book, there were so many stories that I could recall him sharing with me that I wasn't able to connect the dots. And so I delved into this book. I just finished our legislative session last Monday, and read this book in one day. I had jury duty on Monday. And I went through this entire book while I was sitting waiting for jury duty. And what was great about it, like I said, I was able to connect the dots. I mean, Dawit used to tell me about these stories of how he left his home country and went into Kenya and had to traverse the jungles. And you know, I'm from the United States, so I'm thinking about all these animals. Like, he went into the jungle and he had lions, and I mean, and the book touches on this stuff, and I'm thinking, man, even just coming here to BNA today, I brought my daughter because I mean, she's fascinated with anyone who authors books, so I wanted to make certain she was in the presence of a real good man who wrote a real good book, and there's hesitancy. You know, people back at Hopkins, they used to laugh at us from Baltimore because they said, man, do y'all get out of Baltimore City at all? Not very much. So even coming here today, I'm like anxious because I'm trying to figure out, okay, where am I going? And you're talking about a man who left at 15 years old, Eritrea, to go into a country, into a future that he had no idea what it held. And was locked up. I mean, I'm a college student, and he's talking about all these stories, and I mean, you can't do anything but just sit there and listen and wonder. And when I got this book, I was able to get through it through a day because I wanted to understand these stories that he had told me that I didn't quite understand. And man, how fulfilling the book was. And what jumps out is the importance of relationships. I finished the book, like I said, on Monday night, and I believe I called Dawit maybe a little bit after 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and we sat on the phone speaking for about an hour or so, just about the book and how his, and number one, we talked about his memory. I can't get past the memory either. I'm thinking, I can't recall what I did last week, and he's reflecting back to when he was in kindergarten, and my daughter said, man, he remembers a song from kindergarten? And he has this one special song that I remember he used to talk about a lot at Hopkins, and boy, it was in there, the candy liquor. So anyway, what I wanted to say, and again, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this as well. For those of you who have not had an opportunity to get through this book, looking at the political climate that we're in today, when we have so much animosity towards immigrants, I mean, this book goes to show you the lengths that people go through to find better for themselves and for their families. And it makes you a little bit sad that we're living in the state of affairs that we're living in today, because some of those types of policies and things might have stopped the Dawit Habte from coming here into the United States and blessing us in this country with the type of talent that he has. So with that, I don't want to take too long. Again, I thank you. It's a great book, easy read, great book, and you'll be fascinated. It'll be hard to put down. So thank you, and congratulations, Dawit.
Thank you, Representative Sidner. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Judith Dean, Professor of International Economics at the International Business School, Brandeis University. I might have known you from the book, but please welcome here.
How many of you here have ever had an opportunity to do something for somebody else? Probably all of us. Someone comes and says, there's a need, can you do this? I had this happen to me, and that's how I entered into the life of Dawit, Afwerki, Lemlem, and Aiden. In fall of 1990, I moved here to DC to become professor of economics at Johns Hopkins University, SAIS. I stayed for quite a long time. And that fall, my church told me of this family of refugees where the two women were in need of people to just come over and have English conversation, practice English. So I said, I can do that. So off I went. We would sit on the floor of the apartment in Silver Spring, talking about things like, what is injera really made out of, and can you explain that in English? I'm still trying to learn about that grain that doesn't grow here. What's it like to grow up with war all around you? How did you get here without your parents? All 4 of you. This is just amazing. I was so impressed by this incredible group of 4 teenagers, which really, that's what they were. I couldn't believe that they had done what they had done, and I knew so little of the story at that point. Fast forward a few years, I'm sitting in my office at Johns Hopkins, and the Johns Hopkins Gazette comes out. I think I got an email, shot out, I looked at it, opened it up, read it, and said, oh my goodness, it was all about Dawit. And incredible stories, amazing stories, including the one of how all his hard work allowed him to bring his littlest sister over so that her hearing could be healed for the first time in her life, which just blew me away. I literally ran around the economics department to all my colleagues and said, read the Gazette. You have to read this. This is my friend. Look what he did. And he's only a student. They were amazed. They were truly amazed. We can fast forward a little bit further and the creation of Natna, the company that you were trying to start. So I was part of the story without even knowing it. I'm hearing about it, particularly over dinner at the Eritrean Cultural Center, which I think I shocked that night, because I still remember going in with Dawit to that dinner where the entire place was full of men. And then there was me. And I said to Dawit, are you sure I'm supposed to be here? And he said, yeah, there's some women here. I said, yeah, but they're only serving the rest of the food. So I don't know. I think I gave people a shock that night. But we had a great time, and I learned a lot about what he was trying to do back home. And this incredible story of all 4 of these wonderful people that I got to know over the years. I love Toyotas, by the way, so I also began taking my Toyota to Afewerki's shop there in Silver Spring. It was always great to know you could get an appointment because you knew the boss. You know, it's really nice. So I had this honor, joy, and privilege of getting to know these 4 amazing human beings long before I knew the rest of the story. So I was thrilled to hear from Dawit about this book. I read it very quickly, like everybody else, just poring over it. And as was said before, I learned a great deal about an area of the world where I knew a little bit, but clearly not enough. You know, it's very difficult, I think, to write a memoir, a personal story, and be able to insert enough of history for us to understand some of the bigger context in which this life story is taking place. And I think Dawit has done an amazing job of helping us learn what was going on in the bigger picture while continuing to help us see the story from his own personal level. You learn a lot about the politics, you learn a lot about the national struggles, and for me, I think what was really poignant was the tremendous influence that rich and powerful countries from far, far away can have on struggling, fragile nations. How often it was people from other countries making decisions that impacted so many lives, people they didn't know. Sometimes that was for the good, and it actually had good consequences. Sometimes it wreaked havoc because the motivation was wrong or the facts were not known and nobody seemed to have an interest in finding out the facts and doing things properly. It made me think about how much we, sitting in this very rich and powerful nation, have really to say I'm sorry for, and other nations where ill thought out policies have had such severe consequences on so many. But now then you might think that this was really a discouraging book. Not at all, because this isn't really the focus of the book. The focus of the book, I think, is about, as his title indicates, gratitude. I called it Gratitude, Grace, and Giving Back. You see incredible bravery and perseverance of all 4 folks coming through on their own without parents. That just still blows me away. Making it through so many dangers, and yet talking about it, Dawit, with a spirit of humility and gratitude. In particular, I think I see a lot of grace and gratitude throughout this book. You see sort of wonderful God-given mercies that just keep popping up throughout. When he needed wisdom, people appeared that had wisdom and guidance, including one sitting right here in the front row. When he needed money, somehow money just appeared, like the friend, I think, or a family member who was able to come from home and bring money to pay the fine for crossing over the Kenyan border. Amazing, a fine that was enormous. Jobs that came out of nowhere when he needed jobs. Incredible things that would happen periodically. So what I call is God-given grace, just dropping down at the right moments. And you see this tremendous attitude of humility and gratitude in response to that. And an acknowledgement, I think, of all the people that helped in this story, all the people who stepped in and gave. And as a result, I think, as I've seen all their lives, these 4 people that I know, a wonderful spirit of giving back, of tremendous grace and generosity in giving back to others, whether it's here in the United States or back at home. So I think this really is a story about gratitude, grace, and giving back. I thought a lot about this in terms of a famous queen. Many of you might be familiar with Queen Esther from the Old Testament, but there's a famous verse about her that perhaps she was brought to her position for such a time as this. And I think that over and over again, I see instances where Dawit had opportunities, or he made choices that allowed him to give back and to do great good in so many ways. And those are the opportunities where we can always say no, but he didn't. He said yes and moved forward and really took the chance to really give back. And I think truly there were many times when you were brought to a position just for such a time as this. I think in America now, America's traditional generous heart is under attack. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of misinformation, and it's turned the hearts of many people, I think, away from the refugee, from the stranger who's looking for safety, who's looking for peace, who's fleeing danger, looking for a new life where they can really give back. I happen to be on the board of directors of World Relief, a long-term relief and development agency who resettles 10% of the State Department's caseload of refugees. We are extremely distressed right now, as you can imagine. So I think, as was said earlier, it's so important that we remember our own history, our own heritage, and our spirit of generosity and openness to welcome the stranger, to reach out to those in need, because not only is it a blessing to them, but they are a great blessing back to us. And I think you will see that throughout this book. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dean, for the words that you put it rightly so for Dawit. Our next guest is Rose Mary Gaskin. You are most welcome here. I believe I know you from the book, if I'm not wrong as well. So I must be very lucky to know so many people. As one of the Tigrinya book reviewers said, there was a guy in that book by the name Aboy Khalifa. And he said that reading this book, if I met Aboy Khalifa on the street, oh, I know you, Aboy Khalifa. You are the guy whom I know you very well from Dawit's book. And I would have greeted him very well. And the same applies to all. Welcome.
Hi. People have said so many wonderful things about Dawit, and all are true, except for one thing: he's pushy. I told him, I said, I don't need to speak today. I love you. You've done wonderful things. Let's just talk about it together. Dawit, when he was a work-study student in my office, I was at that time the program coordinator at Johns Hopkins University for Multicultural Student Affairs, and the Lord blessed me with this young man. You usually think that you're going to be a blessing to young people, and you are. if your heart is genuine. But more often than not, like Charles, that he had speak a few minutes ago, who was also a student at Hopkins, I was blessed. I used to tell people I had the best job in the world because I got to meet people from all over the world, and I got an opportunity to meet and understand the world so much more than I would have if I had not been at Hopkins or worked with multicultural organizations. Dawit Habta is an amazing man. He really is, but pushy. And I'll tell you what I mean. When he was bringing Akberet to come over to have her hearing repaired so that she could learn English and speak better, he asked me would I work with Akberet for a summer. And we do a lot of summer programs. And, you know, I hemmed and hawed for a minute, but it's Dawit. What are you going to do? He's going to make you do it anyway, so you might as well do it. And I did, and I was so blessed by that experience. I couldn't wait for the days. She came 2 days a week for the entire summer. It was awesome. In reading the book, I had no idea that he'd said anything about me. He didn't say that he had. So I'm reading the book, and I'm just enamored by it. I go, oh, wow, all the stories that he was telling me in my office when we were supposed to be working were just wonderful. And they've come to life in this book. Amazing, and to learn so much history. It's so packed with love and family and history and survival, like others have said, but it's also packed with fortitude and resilience and coming to America. But for Dawit, and getting to that chapter, he called me, I think, 3 days after he brought the book over to my house, and he said, have you read it? Not yet. I'm going to, but not yet. I had meetings last night and the night before. And then, so he calls me again the next night. I said, okay, I'm on page 140, okay? So he says, okay, Rose, go ahead, read it. I guess you haven't gotten to what you need to get to. So when I turned, and here's my life story as well in the book, I'm going, oh my God, he didn't even ask. He didn't ask. He just did it. So I call him, I say, Dawit, do you know you have to get permission to do this kind of stuff? And he goes, Rose, I knew you wouldn't mind. So that's the Dawit I know.
Little things are coming out about Dawit. Well, our next speaker is an equally rambunctious personality. And Miss Rigby Boyd, I'm Sophia. We had our moment at the Ivory Coast Embassy a few years back, visiting there with Ibrahim, a very close friend of ours, a mutual friend, and we were invited there to the grand opening for the Ivory Coast Embassy, which was getting revamped. Ms. Boyd is from the Department of State Public Office, formerly spokesperson and director of public affairs offices for the U.S. Embassy in Chad, Rwanda, and Ivory Coast. When we went to the Ivory Coast Embassy, everybody called her Mama Boyd. Mama Boyd, the podium is all yours.
I know. Thank you. And I don't think I should say so much about Dawit because everybody has said so. And if I do, we're going to be here till tomorrow or a month. It's an endless young man. I was blessed, honored, gratitude to know this young man. I think I know him pretty good somewhere, just like I know Sophia. Dawit's book, although it's about his life, about him, but not really. In a low voice, quietly, gently, like the Hamasians they do. He's not telling just about him or about Eritrea. Dawit is telling this story, Syrian, Afghanistan, Pakistan, the whole world, Italian, way back in the 16th century, Mayflower, It came here, you know it, for the same reason, for the same purpose, for the same opportunity, what the refugees are trying to come today. No more, no less. This country built and is going to be built, someone like David, who came from far away, not because they hated their country, not because they want to run away from their country. No, not at all. But there is a reason in every country forced to run away. But then they came to United States. Them too, they have built. Someone, they said, the great America. Well, the great refugee to make great America. That's what it is. Each and every one of them, African American, you built it where we are enjoying it today. So David, in short, you wrote this book to the world refugee who are coming for a better, not only for yourself. So this is a golden opportunity to each and every one to write and tell the truth. And please, those of you who are in politics, let's try to give this from the White House to the Congress to the Senate. Let them see that the refugees are not murderers, they're not killers. They came here to build themselves, but also to build the United States. So those people who are going to come now, after David, every day, every second, them too, they will be like David. Thank you, David, for telling the story.
Thank you, Mama Boyd. Professor Greg Rigsby, he's the author of Alexander Cromwell, Pioneer in 19th Century Pan-African Thought. And he's not here? Later? Okay. Well, then we'll go to Carolyn Finnegar. Why not? We're just pulling names out of a hat. Absolutely not.
I knew this young man when he was very young. I don't want to.
Bring him with you.
Put me on the spot here.
No.
Goodness, this is beautiful. David was just 15 when he came into my office, and we started a friendship that I have been very grateful for all these years. I've learned so much from him. One of the things, the first thing I had to learn was how to say his name and how to spell Eritrea. Because, do you know where Eritrea is? Well, no, I didn't know where Eritrea was. I knew where Ethiopia was. And we all know, I mean, I know from David why I knew about Ethiopia, but not Eritrea. And so I learned every day. One of the stories I was just telling someone, David was very young. And he came into my office one day, and he walked in and he said, "When you are old, I will take care of you." And I said, "Okay." What? He had been with his National Honor Society, I think, to a nursing home and was appalled that this is how we were taking care of our old people. And he said, "You will never go to one of those places. I will take care of you." And I have told my children, if you don't take care of me, you're in trouble because Dawit's watching. He's checking. So thank you. Thank you, Mona. Thank you all. And thank you, Dawit, for being my friend.
Professor Gregory Rigsby's here now.
Thank you. Go ahead. No, you want me to say something? Just introduce me. Oh, okay. Okay. So why am I here? I am the link between DeWitt and Professor Gregory Rigsby, who's my uncle, and really I read as soon as DeWitt told me about the book, I read the book actually somewhat excitedly. And then I told him my uncle wrote a book too, and I was like, maybe, here's what he told me about writing a book. And he was excited about that, and I told him he was a professor and kind of his background, an immigrant as well, and that's what made the connection. So I just wanted you to know who my uncle was and how he met DeWitt. My uncle was a professor at Howard University of English. I think he was the first PhD in English at Howard University, and he wrote a book several decades ago, actually, about someone named Alexander Crummell, who was the mentor to W.E.B. Du Bois, and actually I participated in that a little bit too, going to the Schomburg with him and what have you. So that's my uncle, and let's see what he has to say.
Thank you. Well, thank you, and indeed it is because of my nephew here, Andre. I was struggling to remember the name. Would you believe that? So that's why I was reluctant to speak. I losing it a bit now, but I first I want to confess I haven't read the book right through as yet, but I would say that the first thing I would say about it is that it's what I would call a safe book. By that I mean you can open it at any point and you would find things that are uplifting, informative, and a very humble voice his is. And yet, it was not a humility that ignored responsibility. I saw many things in here that reminded me also, because I'm from the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago, and I saw many things in here that reflected the kinds of experiences I have had in this country, and adjusting and seeing how the country has expanded. And so one of the things got me is he made a reference to poor people, he said, I think it's poor people, he said, have 4 eyes. 2 to look forward and 2 to look backward, and the backward look is the always feeling that eyes are on you and what you are doing, and so it's something I felt very much myself. And W.E.B. Du Bois himself spoke of something called the double consciousness in his beautiful and memorable work. It was chosen as in the 20th century, one of the finest works done, The Souls of Black Folk. And Du Bois speaks of that same idea of, you put it in 4 eyes, he said, double consciousness. That caught my attention, and again, as I said, I haven't done a coherent reading, but
I just opened the book. I got into that and I read through what he was doing there, and I could share so much of that experience. My experience started in Canada, and then I came over here in the 60s when it was really the time of change in this country. Then another section that I thought that impressed me again when I opened is the whole gallery of, I will call them angels, the rungs on the ladder that he climbed, and unlike Shakespeare, that often the upward link, you don't look where you came from. This is not what is true of Darwin. And I had problems with his name too, as the last. The way I remember it is from damn it. And I think, oh, but I would just switch it a bit to remember his name. But he carefully develops the way he climbed his ladder. And it is a ladder that he has climbed. And it is startling to see the detail that he has remembered about everyone that really helped him. The detail really impressed me, because I have had people too, I would remember them, but not with the kind of detail. I have to feel like as he was taking notes or something, or had to have spoken to them personally or something, but the full detail, and he each time points out particular qualities that helps to define him, the things that impressed him. I remember one case, he was doing some particular course. The book is very instructive too, incidentally. He tells you everything, how he learned it, what he learned in step by step. I almost felt I was going through a course. And these are just sections. I didn't read it coherently, but I would get caught up into something. And I remember him saying he had problems in a particular area, and the instructor recommended that he not be able to get through this course and so. And I thought he was going to castigate at least, because it was not in public at the time. But he said, I agreed with his evaluation of me. He was quite on mark, so he knew what he had to do. Another quality in the book that struck me is his family relationship. This one I can't share with him in terms of the ground from which he was able to speak. That full history, that is something that is different very much from the people who came, who had what would I say is, we are the descendants of a slave group of people, and we have lost that type of thing that I admired so much in his work. The Nigerian writer, he reminded me of Wole Soyinka, who he won a Nobel Prize in Literature. One of the significant things he had that's different from African American writing and Caribbean writing is the ability to have a whole substratum of life, of family, of roots that he could fall back on. When you just see the beginning of the book and you see the whole history I tried to trace it. I got lost many times because I was looking for your name, and yet I'm seeing it on this side and on the other side, and that type of history is the thing I don't have, for example. And that book, Roots, that was written, was not a historical book. It was something like the Odyssey or so. I think it was misread most of the time. It was, he took a series of different characters and put them into one. Major African-American people who had done a lot of work to set the scene so that it could accept people like me, and now Dawit himself, who is appreciating it. What I see in him is something that was very much like how I had, based on my experience, defined the American ethic, which was different from coming from the Caribbean and being under British colonialism. A completely different ethic of the tragic sense of life, you will find, would help to define to a large extent what the European and British idea is. You read Keats and Pope saw life as one long disease. And you would get other people, even Keats, this world where people sit and groan and so. And I saw in America a different kind of spirit, a completely different kind of spirit. Keep on smiling when the world will smile with you, and so. The whole idea of a positive look in life, and many came from eventually the very Europe and came here and absorbed that. In the case of Dawit, I think he had that as part of his personality, period. The way of not seeing life as a place where we sit and groan, but a life among his family, his friends, and even the people he struggles against. And I notice deliberately say struggles and not struggled, because I feel there is ongoing struggle myself. I feel it. I might be wrong, but from your work I feel it. The idea of always seeing the positive side, how I can climb this ladder, what I have to put up with, and I will not complain, I will work. And then to recognize people who are helping. There are so many people who have helped so much. It is, I think, a very, to get somewhat sentimental, a very beautiful quality. I recognize in you in that. It is not as pervasive in our Caribbean literature or in the African America. But for Du Bois, who did a thorough work on Brown, I'm searching for his first name, John Brown, who had given his life, his wife, his sons, 3 sons and so. And it isn't part of the African American literary culture. Du Bois being the only one, and he did a historical kind of study on it and so. But to me, when I read about him, I said, this is the hope of humanity. This country, I mean. that it had people like that. And then you would read about the Quakers, and you would read of so many people and so. And in Dawit, I find that same spirit. He recognizes it, he embraces it, but without forgetting his fundamental roots. I remember I opened again on a page where he was struggling between what he called the logical situation, the intellect, and his heart, because his mother wasn't doing well. And he decided to go with his heart and went home at a very critical moment that he was facing at the time, but he recognized, I have to go back. I recognize also the friendships that were kept. He had several of his cool friends and so that they went through together, they worked. They found time to be able to relax, but never did they not keep striving. That's an admirable quality, and I think it is there in many of the immigrants. The same thing for all the immigrants. The country is made up of immigrants. Some people now think otherwise. But the country now is that. That is the thing that convinced me when I came to the country, because I did not come to the country with love in my heart. I discovered the country by living in it and seeing what was happening, and I just said, this is the hope of humanity. This country is. And Dawit is expressing this gratitude as part of the title of his book. He is expressing this gratitude, he is expressing the spirit of it. But the book isn't only that. The struggle for independence that went on between Eritrea and Ethiopia. This was brand new to me. I did not know of it. I thought always of just Ethiopia. I heard of Haile Selassie. In the Caribbean, Jamaica, they almost worshipped Haile Selassie. And then that is the part when I spoke with Dawit for the first time through my thing, through you, my nephew. When I spoke with him, I felt a little uncomfortable. And the one thing, and I spoke with him at least 3 times on the phone, and we spoke at length about things. I had been very interested in African studies. I had done African American, and African Caribbean studies myself. And I thought that there was a very clever call you made in an observation you made to me in one of our calls. Because deep in my mind was Marcus Garvey. And Marcus Garvey, I thought, was such an outstanding person coming from the Caribbean and so. And Marcus Garvey admired and preached highly of Haile Selassie. I never brought it up with me, but you brought it up because I suspect that was lingering in my mind when I was telling you things. And you indicated, and I'll check you out on it, that Garvey had begun to change when he had the opportunity to meet Haile Selassie himself. We did not know, certainly we did not know. That is one of the enlightening things, and I am going to examine it. I'm going to examine it myself because you had skin in the game, I hadn't. So I'm going to look to see how how valid your representations are in this case. But whatever, it is that deep feeling of, I don't like to use the word nationalism, but I can't think of another word. It's this, because it is larger than that, is the ability to know all of the ground that you came from. That grounding, the kind of thing that even philosophers search for in ideas. To get a grounding is the most important thing. That's what we lack. Our writers do not have that. The emerging African writers have it, as I said, Wole Soyinka in particular. And so we don't have it. Ours is the colonial thing. Your book is an odyssey. It inspired me. And as I said at the very outset, I call it a safe book. You do not have, I wouldn't say you do not have to. You should do it page from page right through. I haven't done that as yet. But you can open it at any point and something will jump at you. And I mean, I am so thrilled many times to hear him speaking of the people who helped him so deeply and the details he would put about them. And more than that, to find out the history of his country. What happened, the role of the Italians. I had heard of that period in the with Ethiopia, but in respect to Ethiopia, not Eritrea. It hasn't been well known. I think you in this are making a major step. So I did see in one of your references, some other person has written a book on it, but I think this comes with a more personal and a more, I can't say more than the other book, but with a feeling of someone who has a bright side to life, not a complaint. And I congratulate you on the work well done. I recommend it very highly.
I just want everyone to know that my uncle said he didn't want to say anything.
Thank you, Professor Rigsby. And now, another person that I know him as well from the book, and he is going to be about my friend, I guess, from the book. That's David Rysack. Please come here and give us your input.
Thank you. Well, hello, everyone. Dawit is a very special friend of mine. He actually is the brother of one of the best men in my wedding, Aforke, his older brother. And I met Aforke through our church, Fourth Presbyterian Church, probably in the mid-'80s, when our church brought Aforke over from Egypt. And he had told me that he had brothers and sisters. And I had no idea that I would get to meet them. But on a church missions trip myself to Kenya, Dawit met me in the airport in Nairobi. And that was the first time I got to meet Dawit. And I think he explains a little bit of that in his book. But it was wonderful to meet him. And shortly thereafter, he came to, our church continued to bring he and Lemlem over. And through the many visits at their apartment, I got to know Dawit better and Lemlem, and my friendship with Aforke certainly deepened also. And we kind of adopted them as our Eritrean family. And we've had Dawit over the house with his wife and family and his folks when they came to visit, and with Aforke and Eden and his children. So through the many years that I've got to know DeWitt, I'm extremely proud of him, and seeing him from a younger man, you know, working on matatus in Nairobi to now working for Bloomberg, and I'm so proud of him and all of his accomplishments. He truly is the American dream. And I say that about his brother, Aforke, too, because they came here with nothing, and they've made something of themselves, which is just totally incredible. So I'm reading his book. I'm not done with it yet, but I love things that I'm learning about him and his culture. I find his culture so rich in their respect for family and their love of their heritage and where they come from. He knows where he come from. He knows generations back, 10 generations, where I'm an immigrant. My family, my grandparents immigrated from Poland and Russia, and my grandparents is as far back as I know. It's just not handed down. They have an oral history, which is just unbelievable and incredible. And so I admire him deeply. We continue to support him and his family. And I'm just speechless to know that, you know, he's done this. This is just wonderful. And he has accomplished much, and we continue to pray for him in the future and his family. Thank you.
No doubt everybody has something to say about Dawit. My question to Dawit every year at the Dahai retreat is, do we have another baby? Is another baby coming? And he goes, yes, we just had one. And I always go, oh, I'm jealous. Well, it's nothing like having a big brother to look up to and a big brother to watch over you. And Dawit writes beautifully about his brother Aforke. I think we all want to meet this person. We met him in the book. Aforke would like to meet you in person and say something about this kid here, this pushy kid here that we have.
Really, I prepare in Tigrinya, but I'm going to try to do it in English. But please, patient with me. I'm going to start with what my dad he used to say when he was a baby. When he was a shepherd, and he went with the cattle, and he was so. My dad, I cannot really try to do it in English, like I said. My dad, he used to call him a sharp. Since he was a baby, he's always a sharp. I'm going to try to say it in Tigrinya. When بنشلو خلصي عياو تحيزو وفيرو عياو تحيزو مسوفرة عب حزاء تغيدو بسعب العوان مزي هجيب العوان مزمات تقريبا عياو تاعنا باقي حزة مزي مالتيو دك إسن انت هذا هون اللهم عبد عبد العوان مزي أبي عزاتي زودي بشخص بالحخلات في الطر بلح كويس ودي له حاجز بخبرنيش تحسس بلحه أبز عدد ما when he comes here he did his school he's always kind seriously when people ask me for advice if I don't know I would just give them his number I don't even ask him to help them they will just call him say hey Aforke will ask your number he will help them because he's really kind. And this book is just a small piece, but he got big heart. It's not just what you see in this guy. He's excellent. Not because he's my brother. He's everybody's brother, everybody's father. And I'm proud of to be his brother. Thank you.
Well, you have heard a lot about about me, my family, but it's not that easy to live with people like myself. Who are so 5 kids, extremely energetic. Writing a book for 11 years, and taking your life to whatever comes to your mind takes someone with an extraordinary heart and patience. So thank you. People like me are borderline. I don't want to finish the sentence. But it takes someone with a big heart to live with and to take care of. So thank you. Thank you, Mona. I would like to give shout out to everyone, including the people who are not here. Of course, Mike Bloomberg and others. But there is someone that I really have to give shout out to. Professor Rigsby. Andre drove from New York to bring his uncle. And his uncle, Professor Rigsby, had not given speeches for many years. He made an exception today. And I will try to narrate the last part of Robert Frost. I'm sure Professor Rigsby has taught Frost for many years. The last part of walking by the woods on a snowy night or evening. The woods are dark. The woods are beautiful, dark, and deep. But I have promises to keep and miles to travel before I sleep and miles to go before I sleep. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, now is the big chance for everybody to sit down and have their books autographed by Dawit, to carry it for posterity. I was there when? When the first one came out, right? Because Dawit promises to have many more. We've worked with Dawit over the years, reading his many writings before this book, and always thought that someday he would put it together in a book, but never in my wildest imagination did I ever think it was going to be this illustrious. Looking forward to the next one, and try not to make them so short. Every chapter I went up going, did he have to cut it here? And lots of stories about Eritrea, lots of tellings about Eritrea that for someone who grew up outside of Eritrea, born and raised in Tanzania and in Ghana, almost felt like a foreigner coming to meet Eritrea, learning the streets of Asmara and trying to figure out where the coffee shops are, going, okay, the next time I go, I won't need MapQuest. I'll take this book with me. So thank you very much for coming, and hope you get your copies of your book. Dawit has.
Final words for BNA, Bloomberg BNA. This is the best of Bloomberg. We have a program called Bob, B-Bob when it comes to Arlington. In New York, it's Bob, best of Bloomberg. In BNA, here in Arlington, it's B-Bob, best of Bloomberg BNA. And this is it. This is a company, a family, and a team. And to my good friend here, a lot of the articles that I wrote,
Some of them I might actually get sued for plagiarism, for copying many of them. So thank you very much, and thanks everyone. So
Yes, we'll do the book signing. There's water in the back, so help yourselves.